Hey everybody, hidden beneath the surface of the Earth are secret places that are shrouded in mystery and history. From ancient cities buried over centuries to secret bunkers and forgotten tunnels. Join me, world. Building underground has always been a popular choice for secret or concealed facilities, as there are a number of advantages that come from it, such as security, stealth, and isolation. Underground spaces provide natural barriers from physical and digital surveillance, making them ideal for sensitive operations. The need for secrecy in certain facilities, from government installations and data centers to private labs and secure bunkers, gives underground developments an advantage. These structures are pretty much invisible to satellites and aerial observation, making them harder to monitor, and they use the Earth itself to provide a layer of natural protection. In modern times, though, underground facilities also provide a measure of digital security that's increasingly important. Modern tech world to see just how effective they actually are, from historical sites to modern developments. Now let's head over to Turkey to take a look at the Cappadocia underground cities. Now, these are some of the most surprising and impressive ancient sites in the world. Located in central Turkey, Cappadocia is most famous for its unusual landscape, including those fairy chimneys, which are tall, thin spires of volcanic rock. But beneath the surface, there is a vast network of rooms, tunnels, and passageways that were once thriving underground cities. Believed to have first been built by the Hittites around 8th century BC, and then further expanded by other civilizations like the Byzantines, early Christians, and even the Ottoman Turks, the cities acted as refuges and shelters, protecting their residents from invasions, persecutions, and bad weather conditions. The most well-known of them all is the Derinkuyu underground city, which had been completely forgotten about until it was rediscovered in 1963, when a homeowner found a hidden entrance in their basement during renovations, while the tunnels, sometimes over a mile long, connected Derinkuyu with other underground cities like Kemakli, which was a similar structure but with narrower tunnels. Heavy circular stone doors were rolled into place to block off entrances to prevent any enemy invasions, which allowed them to be completely self-sufficient over long periods of time. There are churches, chapels, all meaning that normal life could continue no matter what was happening outside. During the Roman and Byzantine periods, they used them to avoid persecution, with the invading armies having no clue that the people were hiding beneath their feet. Let's head to Croatia now and take a look at the Zeljava Air Base, which is on the border between Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. It is one of the largest and most secretive Cold War military installations in Europe. It was built by the former Yugoslavia between 1948 and 1968. This base was designed to be an indestructible fortress that was able to withstand nuclear attacks. The facility, also known as Object 505, was a hugely complex project, and it shows just how tense state-of-the-art facilities to allow it to be self-sufficient, including its own power plant, air conditioning system, water reservoir, and even a hospital. The hangars were designed with automated doors and decoy measures, allowing the MiG-21 fighter jets to be launched almost instantly. This network provided the ability to scramble aircraft without really exposing them to potential airstrikes, which was a critical element during the Cold War. The airbase, though, saw limited active use because it became more of a deterrent than an active combat installation. With the outbreak of the Yugoslav wars in the early 1990s, however, it became a battleground in a different way. And in 1992, Yugoslav forces destroyed the infrastructure to prevent it from being captured by Croatian and Bosnian forces. The detonations during this mission were so powerful that they left massive craters on the runway, and parts of the complex remain hazardous to this day, as there's still unexploded ordnance and mined areas across the site. Let's head over to New York in the United States and City Hall Station. Metro networks one of New York's transit system. Of course, few people who go to New York in modern times have any idea that it's even there, and it's become somewhat of a secret piece of history beneath the streets. The station was designed by the architectural firm Hines & Lafarge, who took elements from the City Beautiful movement, which focused on artistic detail in urban design. They worked with the Spanish architect Rafael Gustavino to create the station's vaulted ceilings, and the rest was truly something special. These ceilings, covered in green and cream-colored tiles, give it a Gothic or Romanesque feel, while brass chandeliers and skylights illuminate the station, allowing natural light to filter down. It was, though, closed to the public in 1945, only 41 years after it opened. The main reason for this was the growing demand for longer subway trains and the station's tight curvature, which was originally designed for smaller trains. Instead of investing in costly renovations, the IRT instead chose to close the station and divert its line through the nearby Brooklyn Bridge Station, which could handle longer platforms. While it is closed to regular between the 10th and 12th centuries, and there are no records of who created them or really why, which has made them one of the biggest archaeological mysteries on the continent. The tunnels are typically cramped with low ceilings and are just usually wide enough for a single person to crawl through. They have small, rounded ceilings and sloping floors, suggesting that they were carefully carved with primitive tools. And they also have a series of uniquely crafted features like small alcoves, schlups, or tight-squeezing holes that connect different sections of a tunnel system. These holes force individuals to crawl, making the tunnels even more difficult to move through and, yeah, a bit claustrophobic. This challenging design has led to some researchers suggesting that Erdstall tunnels were meant to be a defensive shelter. Well, the lack of supplies, ventilation, or clear escape routes within the tunnels, however, means that this is unlikely to have been their main purpose, as they would have been impractical for long-term use. Other suggestions are that the tunnels may have held religious or ritual significance. In medieval European cultures, caves and underground spaces were often used for agricultural purposes, possibly as a form of ancient cold storage. While they aren't well ventilated, their underground location could have provided a stable, cool environment, especially at a time before more efficient storage methods were available. The fact that there are so many ideas about what these tunnels were used for shows just how little we really understand them and the people who dug them. New Erdstall tunnels are found all the time, so we're not even sure how large the network is. It will only be by further study that the truth will hopefully one day be revealed. Moving up to Scotland, the Edinburgh Vaults. Edinburgh is a city that's steeped in history, and one of the more fascinating parts of it are the Edinburgh Vaults. Built in 1788 as part of Edinburgh's South Bridge, the vaults are beneath the streets of the city and have been a mysterious place for more than 200 years. The series of chambers were first used as storage and workspaces for the businesses at ground level, but because of their poor construction and damp conditions, they were quickly abandoned. The South Bridge was meant to be something for Edinburgh to enjoy. Homeless people, outcasts, and criminals soon began moving in, which led to an increase in illegal activity. Smuggling, robbery, and gambling became commonplace as the vaults became a haven for gangs that were well out of reach of the city authorities. More recently, they've also become associated with some paranormal activity. After being eventually abandoned in the 19th century and lost to history for a while, the vaults were rediscovered in the 1980s during an excavation, and it was then that ghostly encounters began. Visitors and guides often hear strange voices, footsteps, and sense an unexplained presence within the chambers, and one of the vault's most famous spirits is known as Mr. Boots, who is said to be a tall, aggressive figure that often chases visitors. Now it's a much-visited tourist attraction, giving people an idea of the darker side of Edinburgh's past. The vaults are known as some of the most haunted places in the whole country, which is said to be a result of the secret horrors that once took place down there. Alright, headed over to Poland with Wieliczka threw her engagement ring into a salt mine in Hungary, only to find it becoming stuck in the salt deposits at Wieliczka. The mine first began being used in the 13th century as a time when salt was as valuable as gold, and it quickly became one of Europe's leading salt producers. The salt mine was so important to Poland's economy that it was referred to as Poland's white gold. So the Wieliczka mine was treated with great care, and over time it became a source of national pride. Over generations, the miners turned the mine into an underground world of sculptures, chapels, and decorations made entirely out of rock salt. The most famous of these is the Chapel of St. Kinga, which is the cavernous space that was carved entirely by hand from salt rock. The chapel's decorated with salt crystal chandeliers, altars, and statues, including a detailed copy of Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. It is one of the largest and most beautiful underground chapels in the world, where Mass is still regularly held and weddings and concerts are hosted. The salt is now mostly gone in a labyrinth of tunnels and aqueducts that lie beneath one of Italy's oldest cities. With a history that stretches back over 2,400 years, it was originally carved by the ancient Greeks in the 4th century. The tunnels and caverns have since been expanded and repurposed over thousands of years, turning from an ancient aqueduct into bomb shelters, and today as a historical attraction that offers a glimpse into Naples' past. Originally, the Greeks used the extracted tough stone to build the upper city, creating a network of tunnels below as a natural byproduct of that process. This network grew further under Roman rule when the tunnels were transformed into an aqueduct system, which brought fresh water to Naples from distant sources. And as Naples expanded, so did that underground network. It became one of the most intricate and extensive water systems in Europe. The tunnels were actively used for that purpose until the late 19th century, when water contamination concerns led to their abandonment. During World War II, the Naples Underground took on a new role as air raid shelters for the people. The bombings during the war made these tunnels came to be. We're gonna fly over to Vietnam now for the Chu Chi Tunnels. These are an extensive network of underground tunnels that played a critical role during the Vietnam War. Found around 44 miles or 70 kilometers to the northwest of Ho Chi Minh City, the tunnels are more than 155 miles long in all, and were first built in the late 1940s by the Viet Minh. With an extremely clever design, the Chu Chi Trails are a multi-layered underground system reaching depths of up to 33 feet. Far from being just a way to get around in secret, they provided shelter, strategic opportunities, and living spaces for soldiers. They had kitchens, meeting rooms, storage areas, weapon caches, and even makeshift hospitals, with all these spaces being carefully ventilated and designed to be narrow, which helped defend against foreign soldiers. The entrances to the tunnels were concealed with leaves, sticks, or mud, making them nearly invisible, and the Viet Cong created a series of booby traps within and around the tunnels, such as pits with a historical site and a powerful reminder of the tactical skill of the Viet Cong during the wars they fought. Let's head to the Middle East, Iran and Kariz Kish. Kariz Kish, which is also known as the Kish Kanat, is an ancient underground aqueduct system on Kish Island in Iran. Amazingly, it's over 2,500 years old, and it was originally designed to bring fresh water to the island's residents. Kish Island's known for its dry climate and its lack of natural fresh water sources, and it was the construction of the Kariz that made this possible for a community to thrive here. The Kanat system was built using the island's unique coral and limestone geology, and it drew water from underground sources. Kanats were initially developed in ancient Persia and then later spread throughout the Middle East, Central Asia, North Africa. But unlike wells, which only provide access to groundwater at a single location, Kanats involve a series of sloping tunnels that are dug into mountainsides or highlands. These tunnels channel the water downhill over long distances, partially converted into a cultural center with sections of the tunnels open for visitors to explore. Inside, you can see some amazingly lit chambers and exhibitions that showcase Persian art, ancient tools, and historical artifacts that show how ahead of their time the builders of this ancient water system truly were. Let's trek over to Canada and the Moose Jaw Tunnels in Saskatchewan. They're a network of underground passageways that are steeped in mystery, with stories linking them to everything from bootlegging and organized crime to immigration and labor in the early 20th century. Beneath the small city of Moose Jaw, the tunnels have become a unique attraction that reveals a forgotten chapter of Canadian history, and one that's still not fully understood. The origins of Moose Jaw tunnels dates back to the late 19th century, when a large number of Chinese immigrants arrived in Canada to work on the Canadian Pacific Railway. Following the completion of the railway, many of the workers were left with few opportunities, and discriminatory policies like the Chinese head tax made things even more difficult for them. As a result, some of those in Moose Jaw began to live and work underground and use the tunnels as a refuge from the unwelcome situation above ground. The tunnels allowed them to work in safety and seclusion, taking up jobs in laundries, restaurants, and other small businesses. The tight underground corridors and the hidden rooms became a workplace and a home for them, offering a space where they could live on their own terms. In the 1920s, during the height of Prohibition in Canada and the US, the Moose Jaw tunnels would then take on a new role for bootlegging. Alcohol was illegal in both countries, but the closeness of Moose Jaw to the US border made it the perfect place for smuggling operations. The tunnel's secretive nature gave rise to stories of famous mobsters, including Al Capone, using Moose Jaw as a base for their bootlegging empire, although there's no definitive evidence that Capone himself ever set foot in the tunnels. Today, Moose Jaw tunnels have been a system that operates alongside the public Moscow Metro. Now, officially, its existence has never been confirmed, but accounts from former Soviet officials, urban explorers, and defectors make it more than likely that such a network does actually exist. It's said to have been built during the Cold War to serve the elite members of Soviet society, high-ranking officials, and military personnel. The rumors of Metro 2 go back to the Stalin era, specifically the late 1940s, when Cold War tensions were at their greatest. Known as D6, the alleged system was built under Stalin's orders and designed to protect the Soviet government in the event of a nuclear attack. The depth and extent of Metro 2's tunnels, if they exist, aren't known, but some claim they run deeper than the public Moscow Metro. And with the Soviet government's focus on security infrastructure, the creation of such a network was completely feasible. Some sources have claimed that it could be up to 31 miles long, going far beyond the borders of Moscow to connect with military bunkers and important locations, but Metro 2 still remains unconfirmed. Russian government officials consistently deny its existence, and independent attempts to map or locate the tunnels have failed to come up with any conclusive evidence. Let's head south to India and Chandbauri. Chandbauri, which is in the small village of Avaneri in the state of Rajasthan in India, is one of the most intricate step wells in the world. It was built over 1,000 years ago, and it dates back to the 9th century and was commissioned by King Chandra of the Nikumba dynasty. Now, step wells or bauris were mainly designed as water reservoirs in the dry regions of western India, where rainfall was pretty scarce. But among these structures, the Chandbauri stands out above the rest because of its scale and complexity and because of the way it looks. The structure is geometric and symmetrical, and descending 13 stories into the earth, it reaches a depth of about 100 feet, making it one of the deepest step wells there. The well has over 3,500 narrow steps arranged in a precise and symmetrical design, though. It's a great example of the artistic brilliance of the early Indian craftsmen, with each tier of steps and walls being covered with carvings and stone sculptures. One side of the stepwell includes a beautifully formed pavilion and a series of chambers that are believed to have been used for royal purposes. These chambers have elaborately carved pillars and sculptures of Hindu deities, most of which are dedicated to Lord Vishnu, as well as motifs that are typical of Rajasthani architecture. It isn't just a place of legend either, with the belief being that Chandbauri was actually built by spirits in a single night, thanks to how deep, complex, and mysterious it is. Well, this is of course just a myth, and it shows how impressive Chandbauri was seen to those by those who relied on it, and how it became a central part of their community. Heading north to China, Dijiaqing. Dijiaqing, or the underground city in Beijing, China, is a large network of underground tunnels and bunkers that were built in the 1960s and 70s, such a fear that it would be needed for potentially years at a time, that spaces were also set aside for schools, movie theaters, factories, and even farms to ensure it could be self-sufficient. For a place that remains such a secret, the scale of this city is unbelievable. Thousands of Beijing citizens, including school children and factory workers, were brought in to dig the tunnels, often by hand, and the project became a massive nationwide effort. With such an extensive network and prime locations, it's likely that this place connected directly with the most high-ranking government buildings, allowing political leaders to move safely and secretly in case of emergency. Ultimately, though, Dijiaqing never saw use as a wartime shelter. As tensions eased and nuclear threats reduced in the 1980s, the underground city was mostly abandoned and fell into disrepair. For a brief time in the early 2000s, parts of it were open to tourists, offering them a glimpse of it for themselves, but safety concerns and structural issues soon led to its closure. Not much is known about the current ground city. This system was first carved out by the Romans as early as the 3rd century, and then later expanded in the Middle Ages. It's been in use as a refuge during various points in history, and as over 300 chambers connected by 2 miles of tunnels, they provided a secure shelter for villagers needing protection. Originally, the caves were created as a chalk quarry with soft white stone that was used as building materials across the region. However, as waves of invasions swept across Europe, these tunnels became a safe haven for villagers. From the 9th century onward, as Viking raiders attacked regions throughout northern France, locals adapted the tunnels into secure refuge, adding new chambers to create a fully functioning underground settlement. The tunnels continued to serve this purpose into the 100 Years' War between France and England in the 14th and 15th centuries, and later during the religious conflicts of the 16th century. The layout of these caves is highly organized and features rooms that are designated for specific functions, such as kitchens, chapels, and stables. Each space within the tunnels was designed true to modern history. They were used, for example, during the First World War, and you can see evidence of this. Thousands of soldiers, many from Australia and New Zealand, left inscriptions on the walls marking their names, hometowns, and messages. These have turned the caves into an unofficial memorial, as with many of 3,000 of them having been documented, it creates an emotional link between the medieval history of the caves as a refuge and their later use as a bunker for troops. Traveling over to England now, the smugglers' tunnels in Cornwall. They're a network of hidden passageways and tunnels that weave through the region's cliffs and coastline. In the 18th and 19th century, Cornwall was a center of smuggling, with its tall cliffs, secluded beaches, and hidden coves, providing ideal cover for illegal activities. Smuggling became an important part of Cornish life as high taxes on imported goods like tea, brandy, tobacco, and silk made legal trade increasingly unprofitable. Coastal communities were often isolated, and fishing corridors and hidden entrances that only locals knew how to access. Many coastal towns in Cornwall, such as Polperro and Penzance, have stories of tunnels that led from the shore to local businesses, where contraband could be stored and distributed, and then the design of them meant they could be used to hide people and goods, which allowed smugglers to hide from the authorities if they needed to. But one of the most famous people linked with Cornwall's smuggling history is John Carter, known as the King of Prussia, who led a gang of smugglers that were based in Prussia Cove. His smuggling ring was surprisingly organized, using tunnels, lookouts, and signal systems to avoid the customs officers who patrolled. Carter and his men became well known for how bold they were, with stories of battles between the smugglers and revenue men becoming part of the local folklore. A few tunnels have been preserved, and guided tours are available in some areas, allowing visitors to explore those passages and learn about the smuggling trade. Alright, we're going to go across the pond to Colorado in the United States for the Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Into the mountain, where it's protected by solid granite, and it's further fortified to endure any major attack. The entrance is a massive steel blast door that weighs around 25 tons, and it's capable of sealing off the facility from the outside world. Once inside the facility, it's like a small underground city, complete with its own infrastructure, systems, and contingency measures. As well as NORAD, this complex is also the base of operations for U.S. Northern Command, the Space Force, and the Defense Intelligence Agency. The whole facility was designed to operate independently for up to 30 days in isolation if necessary. Now, to support this, it contains systems that provide essential services such as water supply, power, and waste disposal. Incredibly, the entire installation is shock-mounted on massive springs, each weighing around 1,000 pounds, which are capable of absorbing seismic waves from a potential nuclear blast, something that will preserve equipment and allow operations to continue. It's equipped with radar. The facility. There are suspicions, though, that with it being a classified site, there could well be far more that goes on there than what is officially acknowledged. So let's wrap it up. There are many benefits that come from building underground that it's an obvious choice for important structures, from secret transport networks to military bases, water sources, and places of refuge. Communities and nations have benefited from subterranean designs for thousands of years. It can be so secretive, though, that there are probably many more facilities beneath the surface that we have still no idea about. So it'll be interesting to see in the coming years if any more of these places are eventually revealed. Thanks for hanging out with me, guys. I'll see you next time. Thank you to our channel members.